The sky is bleeding, men. May 20th, 1941, 7:15 in the morning, thousands of Hitler's most elite soldiers, the Fallschirmjäger, his prized paratroopers, jump out of airplanes over the island of Crete. They've been told this will be easy. A quick operation, light resistance. The British are broken, retreating, demoralized. Crete will fall in 48 hours. They have no idea they're jumping into their own graves. Private George Dornay of the British 19th Battalion crouches in an olive grove and watches them fall. The parachutes bloom against the Mediterranean dawn, white, yellow, red, green, thousands of them, so thick they blot out the sun. Beautiful, almost, like deadly flowers. Then the shooting starts. The paratroopers are slow, defenseless, drifting targets silhouetted against the morning sky. Dornay raises his rifle and fires. The man in his sights jerks, his parachute cords tangling, and he drops like a stone. Around Dornay, the entire grove erupts. Lee Enfield's cracking, Bren guns chattering, men screaming in German and English and Greek. They're shooting them in their parachutes. One paratrooper crashes through the branches of an olive tree, his harness snagging. He hangs there, struggling, reaching for his knife. He never gets it free. A New Zealand private drives a bayonet through his ribs while he's still suspended in the air. They're stabbing them in the trees. In the village of Castelli, 60-year-old farmer Konstantinos Mitsotakis watches a paratrooper land in his vineyard. The German's ankle snaps on impact. Konstantinos hears it crack. The young soldier writhes on the ground, fumbling for his weapon canister, which landed 20 meters away. Konstantinos walks over with his grandfather's hunting rifle. Then he clubs the German to death with the wooden stock. Old men, farmers, housewives with kitchen knives. They're beating them to death in the fields. The slaughter is so horrific, so catastrophic, that 10 days from now, after the battle is over, after Crete falls anyway, Adolf Hitler will issue a direct order. Never again. No more mass airborne invasions. The Fallschirmjäger, his proud elite, will never again jump en masse into combat. This island has become their tomb. But the story of how that tomb was dug, and who did the digging, and what it cost them, that's a story of courage and carnage, of impossible odds and intimate violence, of a battle so savage it changed the nature of warfare itself. This is the Battle of Crete, the place where paratroopers learn to fear the sky. To understand what happens here, you need to know who these men are, not just their ranks, their souls. Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Andrew, VC DSO, stands in his command post near Maleme airfield, watching the German planes approach. He's 48 years old, though he looks 60. The Great War did that to him. Passchendaele, the Somme, all those French villages whose names he's tried to forget. He'd earned the Victoria Cross in October 1917 at a place called Passchendaele, storming German pillboxes alone with grenades and a bayonet, killing more men in 3 hours than he can count. They'd called him a hero, given him a medal. He'd vomited for 3 days afterward. Now, 24 years later, he's back in uniform commanding the 22nd New Zealand Battalion on Crete. Most of his men are kids, boys from Canterbury and Auckland farms who'd never seen combat until Greece. They'd been evacuated here 5 weeks ago after the mainland collapsed, beaten and exhausted. Half of them don't have proper weapons. A quarter don't have helmets. They're supposed to defend an entire airfield with equipment that wouldn't be adequate for a training exercise. Andrew knows this is impossible, but he also knows something else. New Zealanders don't run, not from Germans, not from anyone. He lights a cigarette with steady hands and waits for the sky to open. Corporal Martin Purple sits in the open door of U-52 Transport number 273, fifth plane in the third wave approaching Crete from the north. He's 23 years old. Fallschirmjäger, 3rd Parachute Regiment. He joined in 1939 because the recruiting posters looked exciting, men soaring through clouds, landing behind enemy lines, doing the impossible. His mother had cried when he enlisted. His father, a postal worker in Munich, had been quietly proud. Purple has jumped 17 times. Fort Eben Emael in Belgium had been his first combat drop, a surgical strike that captured supposedly impregnable fortress in 30 hours. It had been terrifying and exhilarating, and they'd succeeded beyond all expectations. He'd felt invincible afterward. This jump should be easier. The briefing officers said minimal resistance. The British have no aircraft, limited ammunition, they're demoralized from the Greece campaign. Quick operation, secure the airfield, let the mountain troops fly in. Move on. Purple checks his equipment for the third time. He carries only a pistol and 4 grenades. The stupid design of the German parachute harness means weapons must be dropped separately in canisters. You land, get out of your harness, find your canister, retrieve your rifle. It takes time. But the system worked in Belgium and Holland. It should work here. The jump master gives the 2-minute warning. Purple takes a deep breath. Mediterranean air, warm and clean. Below, Crete looks peaceful. Green hills, white villages, blue sea. Nothing to worry about. Konstantinos Mitsotakis wakes at dawn to the sound of aircraft engines. Not unusual. Planes have been flying over the island for weeks. German reconnaissance flights, mostly. He's a farmer, 37 years old, weathered and strong from decades working his family's olive groves near the village of Castelli. His wife, Maria, is already awake, making coffee on their small stove. Their 3 children, Dimitris, 12, Eleni, 9, little Stavros, 4, are still asleep. Konstantinos steps outside. The air is already warm. It's going to be a hot day. He has work to do. The olive trees need attention, and 2 of the goats have been getting through a gap in the fence he's been meaning to repair for a week. Then he looks up. The sky's full of planes. Dozens of them, more. Flying low, in formation, from the north. The sound is enormous, a droning roar that seems to shake the earth. Konstantinos has never seen so many aircraft in one place. He calls for Maria. She comes to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. They stand together, watching. The planes are approaching the coast now, maybe 5 kilometers away. Something is happening. Something big. Konstantinos thinks about the rifle, his grandfather's old hunting rifle, wrapped in oiled cloth, stored in the rafters of their cottage. He hasn't fired it in 5 years, maybe longer. There are 7 rounds left, maybe 8. He should get it down. He doesn't know why. Just instinct. The same instinct that tells a rabbit to freeze when it hears an eagle's cry. Major General Bernard Freiberg. VC commands all Allied forces on Crete, and right now he's experiencing the unique agony of knowing exactly what's coming and being almost powerless to stop it. He's 52 years old, a New Zealander, built like a bull, covered in scars from 2 wars. He has the Victoria Cross, earned at Beaucourt-sur-Ancre in 1916, leading his men through German machine gun fire while wounded 4 times. He'd swum the Dardanelles during the Gallipoli campaign to light decoy flares, swimming 2 miles in freezing water while Turkish bullets churned the sea around him. The man is essentially unkillable. But competence at personal courage doesn't automatically translate to strategic brilliance, and Freiberg knows he's in an impossible position. He has roughly 42,000 men on Crete, British, New Zealand, Australian and Greek troops, but they're scattered, under-equipped and exhausted. The evacuation from Greece 5 weeks ago was chaos. Men arrived without weapons. Units arrived without officers. Equipment was abandoned on mainland beaches. He has no aircraft. The RAF had a few fighters here, but withdrew them a week ago, too vulnerable to Luftwaffe bombing. He has no tanks. He has limited artillery. Ammunition is rationed. Some units are down to 50 rounds per man, and he knows the Germans are coming. British intelligence broke the German codes. Freiburg knows about Operation Mercury, the airborne invasion plan. He knows when, he knows where, he knows the approximate numbers. This should be an advantage. It isn't, because knowing you're about to be hit by a truck doesn't help much if you're tied to the railroad tracks. He's done what he can. Positioned troops around the three key airfields, Maleme in the west, Rethymnon in the center, Heraklion in the east. Dug in infantry, placed machine guns, prepared defensive positions. But he has no reserves, no mobile force to counterattack. If the Germans take even one airfield and start landing transport planes full of mountain troops, the mathematics of the battle change instantly. Freiburg stands in his headquarters near Canea and listens to the first reports coming in. Massive air formations approaching from the north. Hundreds of planes. It's starting. He picks up the telephone to call Andrew at Maleme. The line is already dead. Bombed out. He's fighting blind now. Crete didn't ask for this war. The island, 160 miles long, between 7 and 35 miles wide, had been quietly Greek for generations, a place of mountains and olives, shepherds and fishermen, ancient ruins and older memories. Population, roughly 450,000, scattered in villages clinging to hillsides or huddled along the coast. Then, Europe tore itself apart. Germany invaded Poland in September 1939. France and Britain declared war. The continent burned. By spring 1940, Hitler's Wehrmacht had conquered Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Holland, and France. Britain stood alone. Hitler turned east. Italy, Germany's bumbling ally, invaded Greece in October 1940, expecting an easy victory. The Greeks humiliated them, driving Italian forces back into Albania through the winter. It was embarrassing. Hitler couldn't allow it. German prestige demanded intervention. On April 6, 1941, Germany invaded Yugoslavia and Greece simultaneously. Operation Marita. 24 divisions, over 1,000 tanks, total air superiority. The Wehrmacht crushed through Yugoslav defenses in 11 days. Greece lasted 3 weeks. Britain had sent an expeditionary force, roughly 60,000 Commonwealth troops, to help defend Greece. It wasn't enough. German mechanized divisions rolled through the mainland like a steel tide. By late April, the British were evacuating. Crete became the evacuation point. Between April 24th and May 1st, the Royal Navy evacuated roughly 50,000 troops from mainland Greece to Crete. It was Dunkirk in the Mediterranean, desperate men crammed onto destroyers and cruisers, German Stukas screaming overhead, ships burning and sinking. Thousands of tons of equipment were abandoned, tanks, artillery, trucks, ammunition, left on Greek beaches. The men who arrived on Crete were exhausted, demoralized, disorganized. Many had been in combat for weeks with minimal rest. They'd been bombed, strafed, shelled. They'd watched friends die. They'd retreated across an entire country. Now they were told to defend another one. The problem was resources. Crete had 3 major airfields, Maleme, Rethymnon, Heraklion, and limited port facilities. Supplying 42,000 troops on an island with minimal infrastructure was a logistical nightmare. Ammunition was scarce, food was rationed, medical supplies were inadequate, and the Luftwaffe owned the sky. German bombers hit Crete daily throughout early May. They targeted the airfields, the ports, the supply depots. The RAF's few remaining fighters were withdrawn. The island was naked to air attack. Men learned to dive for cover at the sound of aircraft engines. Slit trenches became homes. The smell of burning fuel and cordite became constant. The troops knew something big was coming. They didn't know what. The Cretan civilians knew too. They'd watched the Germans conquer their mainland. They'd heard stories. Villages burned, civilians executed, resistance fighters hanged. Many Cretans were veterans of earlier wars against the Turks. proud mountain people with a long history of resisting occupiers. They began to arm themselves. Hunting rifles came down from attics. Old swords were sharpened. Kitchen knives were hidden in belts. If the Germans came, they would fight. Meanwhile, 100 miles north across the Mediterranean, the Germans were preparing something unprecedented. General Kurt Student is 51 years old and absolutely convinced he's about to change warfare forever. He's the father of the Fallschirmjäger, the architect of German airborne forces. He'd commanded the Paratrooper assaults on Fort Ibn Emael in Belgium and the bridges in Holland, operations that succeeded spectacularly, capturing supposedly impregnable objectives in hours. Hitler loves him. Göring loves him. He's the golden boy of the Luftwaffe, and he's proposed something insane, taking an entire island by airborne assault alone. Operation Mercury, the invasion of Crete using only paratroops and glider-borne forces, followed by transport planes bringing mountain troops once airfields are secured. No amphibious landing, no naval support. Everything from the air. It's never been attempted. Not at this scale. Student is proposing to drop roughly 22,000 paratroopers onto a defended island in a single day, seize 3 airfields simultaneously, then fly in reinforcements. If it works, it proves airborne forces can win strategic objectives independently. If it fails, Germany loses its entire elite paratrooper corps. Hitler approves it. Barely. He has concerns. The casualties could be severe, but he wants Crete as an air base to threaten British positions in Egypt and the eastern Mediterranean. The invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, is scheduled for late June. Crete needs to be finished quickly. Student has 4 weeks to prepare. The plan is complex. 3 main objectives: Maleme airfield in the west, Rethymnon in the center, Heraklion in the east. 2 waves of paratroopers on the first day. Morning wave hits Maleme and Canea. Afternoon wave hits Rethymnon and Heraklion. Once any airfield is secured, Ju-52 transports will start landing mountain troops continuously. Speed is everything. The paratroopers must secure at least 1 airfield on day 1. If they don't, if they're pinned down without reinforcement, the entire operation fails. Student assembles roughly 600 Ju-52 transport aircraft and about 80 DFS-230 assault gliders. He has the 7th Air Division, experienced paratroopers, and the 5th Mountain Division as follow-on forces. Total strength roughly 22,000 airborne troops plus 7,000 mountain troops. The Fallschirmjäger train obsessively. They practice their jumps, their assembly drills, their attacks on mock airfields. They're told the British forces are minimal, demoralized, poorly equipped. Easy targets. 48 hours and Crete will be German. What they're not told is the fundamental flaw in their equipment. The German RZ-1 parachute harness is garbage. Beautiful in theory, a single attachment point between the shoulders, allowing the paratrooper to land and immediately get out of the harness, but catastrophic in practice. The single attachment point means you can't carry anything heavy. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, ammunition boxes, everything has to go in separate canisters dropped alongside the men. So the paratroopers jump armed only with pistols, grenades, and knives. They land. They get out of their harnesses. Then they have to find their weapon canisters, which might have landed anywhere within a 100-meter radius, while under fire. The British and New Zealanders, watching them land, notice this immediately, and they slaughter them. May 20th, 1941, 6:30 in the morning. The Luftwaffe bombers arrive first. Junkers Ju-88s, Dornier Do-17s, Heinkel He-1L1s, over 100 of them flying in waves. They hit Maleme airfield with everything. High-explosive bombs, fragmentation bombs, incendiaries. The earth convulses. Blast waves flatten the scrub brush. Shrapnel shreds the olive trees. The men of Andrew's 22nd Battalion burrow into their slit trenches and endure. The concussion is physical. a hammering pressure that makes your organs shake inside your chest. The noise is beyond description. Continuous thunder. Some men's ears bleed from the pressure changes. The bombing lasts 30 minutes. Then silence. Shocking, ringing silence. George Dornay lifts his head from his trench. His ears are screaming. Dust and smoke drift through the olive groves. A few small fires burn where incendiaries landed. He checks himself. No wounds, just bruises. Around him, other men emerge from trenches like nervous animals. Someone shouts, points. Dornay looks up. The sky is filled with aircraft, not bombers now. Transports, Ju-52s, the big tri-motor planes, flying in tight formations barely 500 meters up. Dozens of them, then dozens more, then more still, a river of aircraft stretching back to the northern horizon. This is it. The first gliders appear, DFS-230 assault gliders, silent and sinister, swooping down toward the dry Tavernitis riverbed west of the airfield. They're carrying the assault pioneers, the shock troops who will hit the anti-aircraft positions first. The gliders land hard. Dust erupts. Men pour out, already firing. They're heading for the AA guns protecting the airfield perimeter. Then the transports arrive overhead, and the paratroopers start jumping. The Fallschirmjäger exit their aircraft in sticks of 12 to 15 men. The jump is terrifying. Low altitude, high speed, no reserves. You exit into the propeller wash. The RZ-1 parachute snaps open violently, and immediately you're drifting down toward whatever hell waits below. For the first sticks, it's not too bad. They land west of the Tavernitis, relatively unopposed, scramble out of their harnesses, locate their weapon canisters, begin to assemble. Then the subsequent waves arrive and drop directly over Andrew's defensive positions. The New Zealanders open fire. Dornay shoots his first paratrooper while the man is still in the air. The range is maybe 200 meters, easy shot. The German jerks. His chute cords tangle. He spirals down and hits the ground with a sound Dornay will remember for the rest of his life. A wet crunch, like a watermelon dropped from a roof. All around him, the 22nd Battalion is firing into the sky. Lee Enfield rifles cracking steadily. Bren guns on bipods hosing tracers into the canopies. Men are screaming, New Zealanders shouting fire orders, Germans screaming as they die. It's a slaughter. Paratroopers crash through olive tree branches, harnesses snagging, leaving them dangling helpless. New Zealand soldiers bayonet them where they hang. Other paratroopers hit the ground hard and scramble for their weapon canisters, but the canisters landed 50 meters away, 100 meters, some never found. The Germans run across open ground armed with only pistols and are cut down by rifle fire. Some try to surrender immediately. Hands up, shouting in broken English. Many are shot anyway. The New Zealanders are too pumped with adrenaline and rage to take prisoners yet, and there's no place to put them even if they wanted to. The olive groves turn into an abattoir. Bodies hang in trees, bodies sprawl in the fields. White parachute silk drapes across the landscape like shrouds. The smell of blood and cordite mixes with crushed thyme and wild sage. It's intimate violence, close enough to see faces, to watch men die. But the Germans keep coming, wave after wave. More Ju-52s, more paratroopers, filling the sky. Students' plan depends on overwhelming numbers. Take casualties, yes, but push through, take the objectives, seize the airfield. The problem is that Maleme is defended far better than German intelligence suggested. Andrew's battalion is dug in, well-positioned and armed. The 21st and 23rd battalions support the flanks. Greek troops hold the coastal positions. The Germans are landing directly into prepared kill zones. Casualties mount horrifically. By 9 o'clock in the morning, the landing zones around Maleme look like a disaster. German bodies everywhere. Wounded paratroopers crying for medics. Parachutes tangled in trees. Weapon canisters scattered across fields. Entire squads wiped out before they could assemble. But the Germans are nothing if not disciplined. Major Walter Koch commands the assault glider troops that landed near the Tavernitis Bridge. His job? Neutralize the AA positions, then push toward the airfield. His men take severe casualties. The New Zealanders are dug in on high ground and pour fire down on them, but they're Fallschirmjäger, elite troops, and they don't break. They fight forward, meter by meter. On the eastern side of the airfield, Assault Regiment lands directly into hell. The 23rd Battalion shreds them from prepared positions. Paratroopers land, scramble for weapons, and die before they can fire a shot. The entire regiment commander, Major General Wilhelm Sussmann, dies before he even reaches Crete. His glider's tail breaks off during the approach, and he plummets into the sea. The eastern assault stalls completely. But on the western side, slowly, brutally, the Germans are gaining a foothold. They're taking monstrous casualties, but they're assembling, finding their weapons, forming fighting groups. They push toward Hill 107, the critical high ground overlooking the airfield. Hill 107 is held by C and D companies of the 22nd Battalion. Maybe 250 New Zealanders. They have excellent fields of fire, good cover, and every strategic advantage except numbers. The Germans attack with everything. Mortar rounds scream down. Machine gun fire rakes the summit. Paratroopers advance in short rushes, using the gullies and olive terraces for cover. The New Zealanders fire until their rifle barrels are too hot to touch. Men run out of ammunition and loot it from the dead. Wounded crawl to rear positions. The slope of Hill 107 becomes carpeted with German bodies. But the Germans keep coming. If you appreciate stories like this, raw, unflinching accounts of history's most brutal battles, told through the eyes of the men who fought them, then consider subscribing to Not Nostalgic History. We dig into the moments that change the world, not with sanitized textbook language, but with the dirt and blood and truth that textbooks leave out. Hit that subscribe button, because this story only gets more intense from here. By noon, the situation at Maleme is chaos. The Germans have suffered catastrophic casualties, but they've established a perimeter west of the airfield. They haven't taken the runway. They haven't taken Hill 107. But they're not destroyed either. Not yet. Andrew requests permission to counterattack. Push forward now, while the Germans are disorganized. Wipe them out. But communications are a nightmare. Phone lines are cut. Runners are getting killed. Messages take hours to reach headquarters. Freiburg doesn't authorize the counterattack. He's waiting to see what happens at the other landing zones. He doesn't want to commit reserves until he knows where the main German effort is. It's the right decision strategically. It's a disaster tactically. Because while the New Zealanders wait for orders, the Germans dig in. 8 kilometers east of Maleme, another nightmare unfolds. The valley southwest of Canea, called Prison Valley because of a prison facility there, becomes the landing zone for German glider troops. Their objective: capture General Freiburg's headquarters and the road junction leading to Canea town. 72 DFS-230 gliders swoop down at 0700 hours. Silent approach, then violent landings. Skids grinding across rocky ground, wings shearing off on olive trees, troops pouring out immediately. They land directly among New Zealand and Australian defensive positions. What follows is point-blank combat, the kind of fighting that happens at arm's length. Grenades thrown into slit trenches, men shooting each other across 10-meter gaps. Bayonets and entrenching tools used as weapons. The German glider troops are elite, hand-picked assault pioneers, but they've landed scattered and disorganized. The defenders are dug in and angry. It becomes a close-quarters brawl across the valley floor. One glider crashes 50 meters from a New Zealand machine gun post. The crew scrambles out. The Vickers gun cuts them down before they make 5 steps. Another glider lands intact. Troops deploy tactically, advance toward a Greek position, and are counterattacked by Cretan civilians with hunting rifles and farming tools. This is where the civilians enter the battle in force. Cretan men from the nearby villages have armed themselves, whatever they could find. old rifles, shotguns, axes, knives. They're not soldiers. Many have never been in combat, but this is their island, their homes, their families. They attack with savage determination. A group of paratroopers assembles near a farmhouse. 3 Cretan men, farmers, brothers, names lost to history, attack them with a mix of gunfire and improvised weapons. The fight is brutal and intimate. 1 German is shot, another stabbed, a third beaten with a wooden club. The Germans kill 2 of the brothers, but the survivors escape and keep fighting. All across Prison Valley, the scene repeats. Women hiding children in cellars, then emerging with kitchen knives to kill wounded Germans. Old men sniping from rooftops with hunting rifles. Teenagers throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails. The Germans are shocked. The Geneva Convention says civilians aren't supposed to fight. Civilian resistance is illegal, punishable by summary execution. But nobody told the Cretans about the Geneva Convention. Or they knew and didn't care. The paratroopers begin executing civilians on sight. Anyone armed, anyone suspected of resistance. The rules of warfare dissolve into mutual savagery. By mid-morning, Prison Valley is a confused melee. Germans hold some positions, New Zealanders others. Nobody controls the area. Casualties mount on both sides. The German objective, Freiburg's headquarters, is not reached. Freiburg evacuates to a fallback position anyway, just to be safe. The morning assault has failed to achieve its objectives, but it's also pinned down significant Allied forces. Students' plan is working, barely, despite horrific losses. At 1400 hours, the afternoon wave arrives. Fresh paratroopers, fresh aircraft. Target, the airfields at Rethymnon and Heraklion, farther east along the island. The pilots are exhausted. They flew the morning mission, landed back in Greece, refueled, and immediately took off again. Some haven't eaten. Some are flying on adrenaline and amphetamines. The Ju-52s lumber south across the Mediterranean, heavy with their human cargo. At Rethymnon, the paratroopers drop at 16:15 hours. The defending forces, Australian 27th Battalion and Greek troops, are ready. They'd watched the morning assault from a distance, heard the reports. They know what's coming. They shoot the paratroopers out of the sky. The carnage is worse than Maleme. The Australians are fresh, well-positioned, and absolutely merciless. Paratroopers die in their parachutes, descrambling for weapons, die trying to assemble. The drop zones are pre-ranged by Australian machine gunners. It's target practice with human targets. German casualties at Rethymnon approach 50% in the first hour. At Heraklion, the drop happens at 17:30 hours into the teeth of the British 14th Brigade and Greek forces. Same result. The paratroopers are massacred. Some sticks lose every man before they hit the ground. Others are wiped out within minutes of landing. One Fallschirmjäger lieutenant, wounded and captured, tells his interrogators that his company of 130 men has 12 survivors. 12 out of 130. The afternoon wave is a catastrophe. As darkness falls on May 20th, student tallies his losses and feels sick. Exact numbers are impossible. Communications are disrupted, units scattered, but the estimates are devastating. Roughly 1/3 of his paratroopers are casualties. Killed, wounded, missing, captured. Thousands of Germany's elite soldiers dead in a single day. None of the primary objectives are secure. Maleme airfield is contested, not captured. Rethymnon is firmly in Allied hands. Heraklion is a bloodbath. The follow-on mountain troops can't be flown in because there's nowhere safe to land them. Operation Mercury is on the verge of complete failure. Student considers calling off the entire invasion, evacuating the survivors, accepting defeat. But he knows what that means for his career, for the Fallschirmjäger, for Germany's reputation. An entire airborne army, defeated by exhausted Commonwealth troops and armed civilians. Unacceptable. He makes a decision. Commit everything to Maleme. Forget Rethymnon and Heraklion for now. Mass every available reserve, every aircraft, every paratrooper. And take that. One airfield. Get transports landing. Get the mountain troops on the ground. Win by sheer bloody persistence. It's a gamble. But student is out of options. On Crete, the defenders spend the night digging in, treating wounded, counting ammunition. The New Zealanders at Maleme can hear the Germans digging too, out in the darkness beyond the perimeter. Occasional shots crack across no man's land. Wounded men cry for help in German and English. Leslie Andrew walks his lines, checking positions, encouraging his men. They've held today, beaten back the elite German paratroopers. His boys, farm kids from New Zealand, stood against Hitler's best and won. But Andrew feels uneasy. The Germans are still out there, still fighting. They should have collapsed by now, surrendered, broken. They haven't. Tomorrow will be worse. George Donny sits in his slit trench, cleaning his rifle by moonlight. His hands shake slightly. He'd killed at least 6 men today, maybe more. Shot them from the sky, shot them on the ground, watched them die. He feels nauseated and exhausted and wired all at once. Around him, the olive grove smells of death, bodies everywhere. German paratroopers hanging in trees like grotesque ornaments. In the morning, they'll have to bury them or burn them. Can't leave bodies in this heat. He tries to sleep. Can't. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees parachutes opening, men falling, blood on white silk. It's going to be a long night. May 21st, 1941. 0400 hours. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew receives the order that we'll lose the battle. He's to withdraw from Hill 107. The order comes through a runner, a young private who's nearly been killed twice getting the message through German fire. Andrew reads it by flashlight in his command post, reads it again, certain he's misunderstood. He hasn't. The order comes from Lieutenant Colonel James Hargest, the brigade commander. Pull back from Hill 107, consolidate positions east of the airfield. The hill is too exposed, too vulnerable. Better to establish a stronger defensive line farther back. It's insane. Hill 107 overlooks the entire airfield. Whoever holds that hill controls Maleme. Andrew's men have held it through a full day of German assault. They're dug in, they have ammunition, they're ready to hold it another day. The Germans tried to take it yesterday and failed. Why give it to them now? Andrew considers refusing. It's a court-martial offense, but he's earned the right to make his own tactical decisions. His men have bled for that hill. But military discipline is iron. Orders are orders. And maybe Hargest knows something he doesn't. Maybe there's a bigger picture Andrew can't see. He orders the withdrawal. At 0500 hours, the 22nd Battalion pulls back from Hill 107 in good order, moving east along the coastal road. They leave the high ground unoccupied. They assume someone else will take over the position. No one does. At 0600 hours, German scouts probing the hill realize it's empty. They can't believe it. They'd been preparing for another day of brutal assaults, expecting massive casualties. Instead, they just walk up the slope unopposed. By 0700 hours, German forces occupy Hill 107. Maleme airfield is now under German observation and fire. This is the turning point. This is where Crete is lost. Student, receiving the news at his headquarters in Greece, nearly weeps with relief. He'd been preparing to call off the invasion. Now, suddenly, impossibly, he has the critical high ground. He immediately orders transport planes to start landing at Maleme. The airfield is still under Allied artillery fire, still contested, but he doesn't care. Land anyway. Get troops on the ground. The first Ju-52 attempts a landing at 0830 hours. It comes in low over the sea, touches down on the Maleme runway, which is pockmarked with bomb craters and littered with debris. Allied artillery opens fire immediately. Shells burst around the taxiing transport, the Ju-52 slews to the side, one landing gear collapsing, but the mountain troops inside scramble out and sprint for cover. The plane is a wreck, but the men are on the ground. More transports follow. They land under fire, crash land, belly land on the beach beside the runway. Some are destroyed, hit by artillery, flipped by craters, torn apart by machine gun fire. The losses are staggering, but Student doesn't care about losing aircraft. He cares about getting troops onto Crete, and slowly, brutally, it's working. By noon on May 21st, roughly 2,000 mountain troops have landed at Maleme, 2,000 fresh soldiers, properly equipped, joining the battered paratroopers. The numerical balance starts to shift. The Allied commanders realize their mistake. Freiburg orders an immediate counterattack. Retake Maleme, retake Hill 107, drive the Germans back into the sea. But organizing a counterattack with exhausted troops, disrupted communications, and constant air attack is nearly impossible. The attack is scheduled for nightfall. 2 New Zealand battalions, the 20th and 28th, will advance west along the coast road, retake the airfield, hold it. It's the right plan. But it comes 12 hours too late. May 21st, 2300 hours. The New Zealand counterattack begins under cover of darkness. 800 men advancing west toward Maleme, moving through olive groves and vineyards, trying to stay off the road where German machine guns are waiting. They have no artillery support, no air support, limited ammunition. They're attacking uphill against dug-in German positions reinforced throughout the day. But they're New Zealanders. They attack anyway. The initial advance catches the Germans by surprise. The 20th Battalion hits the eastern edge of the airfield perimeter, overruns several positions, kills or captures dozens of paratroopers. For a brief moment, it looks like it might work. Then the German mortars find their range. Shells drop among the advancing New Zealanders. Men are torn apart by shrapnel. The olive groves flash with explosions. Machine gun positions open up, German MG-34s firing at 600 rounds per minute, tracers hosing through the darkness. The attack stalls. Lieutenant Charles Upham, who will become one of only 3 men ever to win the Victoria Cross twice, leads his platoon forward anyway. Upham is 29 years old, a farmer from Canterbury, skinny and tough as leather. He'd already distinguished himself on the first day, knocking out German positions single-handedly, killing multiple paratroopers at close range. Tonight he's trying to take a machine gun nest that's pinning down his entire company. He crawls forward through the scrub, grenades in hand, while the MG-34 sweeps overhead. 50 meters, 30 meters. Close enough to smell the German's cigarette smoke. He throws his grenades, perfectly placed, and the machine gun goes silent. Upham rushes the position, pistol drawn, finds 3 dead paratroopers and 1 wounded. He secures the position and waves his platoon forward. But individual heroism can't overcome strategic disadvantage. The counterattack is uncoordinated. Different battalions advancing at different times. No communication between units. No overall tactical control. The Germans, despite being surprised, recover quickly and hold their ground. By 0200 hours on May 22nd, the counterattack has failed. The New Zealanders withdraw, carrying their wounded. They've suffered heavy casualties for minimal gain. Maleme airfield remains in German hands. Crete is now mathematically lost. The Germans can fly in reinforcements faster than the Allies can stop them. It's just a matter of time. The next 4 days become a nightmare of fighting withdrawal. Student pours troops into Maleme. The transports land continuously, every 3 minutes during daylight hours, plane after plane, accepting horrific losses. Roughly 1 in 4 aircraft is damaged or destroyed, but 3 out of 4 make it. The mountain troops assemble, organize, attack. The Allied defensive line east of Maleme starts to crumble. May 22nd, German forces push east, taking the village of Platanias. House-to-house fighting. Greek civilians caught in the crossfire. The defenders fall back to the next ridge line. May 23rd, the Germans reach Canea. The town is evacuated. Freiburg moves his headquarters again, farther east. The withdrawal is becoming a rout. George Darnay and the remnants of the 19th Battalion are part of the rear guard. They fight from one defensive position to the next, holding long enough for other units to withdraw, then pulling back themselves. It's exhausting, demoralizing work. They're always outnumbered, always outflanked, always retreating. The Luftwaffe owns the sky. Stukas dive bomb any concentration of troops. Fighter planes strafe the roads. Movement during daylight becomes suicidal. The Allied forces learn to hide during the day, move at night. Casualties mount from exhaustion as much as combat. Men fall asleep while walking. Dehydration kills as many as bullets. It's late May, temperatures in the 30s Celsius, water supplies limited. Wounded men are left behind because there's no way to carry them. The discipline starts to fray. Some units stay cohesive, officers maintaining control. Others dissolve into clusters of stragglers, just trying to survive. At Rethymnon and Heraklion, the Australian and British garrisons are still holding. They defeated the German attacks and controlled their sectors. But they're isolated, cut off from the main force. No supplies getting through, no reinforcements, no orders. They fight on anyway, tying down German units that could be used elsewhere. Martin Purple is with the Paratroopers pushing east from Maleme. He's survived the initial drop. Barely. Half his company is dead. The company commander is dead. The sergeant major is dead. Purple, a corporal, finds himself leading what's left of his platoon, 8 men out of 42. They advance through abandoned Allied positions, and the evidence of retreat is everywhere. Discarded equipment, ammunition dumps set on fire, vehicles pushed off cliffs. The British are running, but they're still fighting. Purple's group approaches a stone farmhouse. They're taking fire from the upper window. Methodical, accurate rifle fire. British sniper, probably. The standard procedure is to call for mortars, flatten the building, move on. But Purple is tired of killing. He's tired of watching friends die. He's tired of this entire operation. They were supposed to take the island in 48 hours. It's been 4 days, and they're still fighting for every meter. He orders his men to surround the building, then calls out in broken English, "Come out, you surrender, war's over for you." Silence. Then another rifle shot. Misses by a meter. They call in the mortars. 3 rounds. The farmhouse collapses into rubble. When they search the ruins, they find 1 dead British soldier, a kid, maybe 18, and an old Cretan man, also dead, holding an ancient rifle. Civilian and soldier, dead together in the ruins. Purple wonders if they'd been fighting together or if the old man had just been in the wrong place. He doesn't dwell on it. There's too much death to process every individual tragedy. They keep moving. The Cretan civilian resistance becomes legendary and catastrophic. Throughout the battle, civilians fight alongside Commonwealth troops. Men, women, even children. They use whatever weapons they can find. The Germans call them Francs-Tireurs, illegal combatants. Under German military law, they can be executed on sight. And they are. May 23rd, in the village of Castelli, where civilians had killed numerous paratroopers. On the first day, German forces conduct reprisals. Every man in the village between the ages of 16 and 60 is rounded up. No trial, no investigation. They're lined up against the church wall and shot by firing squad. 200 civilians executed. In Candanos, a mountain village where civilians had ambushed a German supply column, the entire town is destroyed, burned to the ground. The Germans erect a sign in the ruins. Here stood Candanos, destroyed in retribution for the murder of German soldiers. The reprisals radicalize the Cretan population further. More civilians take up arms. It becomes a vicious cycle. Civilian attacks, German reprisals, more civilian attacks. Konstantinos Mitsotakis is part of this resistance. After killing his first German on the opening day, he'd hidden his rifle and tried to return to normal life. Impossible. The Germans are everywhere, searching houses, interrogating villagers, executing anyone suspected of fighting. Konstantinos sends his family into the mountains, Maria and the children hidden with relatives in a shepherd's hut. He joins a group of armed civilians operating in the hills south of Castelli. 15 men, mostly farmers, with a mix of hunting rifles and weapons scavenged from dead soldiers. They're not soldiers. They have no training, no organization, but they know the terrain and they're fighting for their homes. On May 24th, they ambush a German supply truck on a mountain road. They kill 4 soldiers and capture rifles, ammunition, and food. It's their first successful operation. 2 days later, German mountain troops track them to their camp. The firefight is brief and one-sided. The Germans have machine guns, mortars, tactical training. The Cretans have courage and desperation. 11 of the 15 are killed. Konstantinos survives by hiding in a ravine, lying motionless under brush while Germans search 10 meters away. He hears them talking, laughing, smoking cigarettes. He holds his breath so long he nearly passes out. When they finally leave, he crawls out and sees his friends' bodies. Some were shot. Some were bayoneted. One was beaten to death. Konstantinos can tell by the wounds. He takes what weapons he can carry and disappears deeper into the mountains. He'll fight for the rest of the war. 4 years in the resistance. He'll never return to farming, never rebuild his old life. The war will hollow him out, leave him a different person entirely. But that's later. Right now, he just runs. May 26th, 1941. Freiburg signals London. Crete cannot be held. Request permission to evacuate. Churchill, in London, reads the message with fury and despair. Another evacuation, another defeat. Greece, now Crete. The entire Mediterranean is collapsing. But there's no alternative. Holding Crete with the current forces is impossible. Permission granted. Evacuate. The Royal Navy is ordered to conduct another emergency evacuation. The second in a month. They'll use destroyers and cruisers, evacuating troops from beaches on the southern coast. Sfakia becomes the primary evacuation point. A tiny port on the south coast, backed by steep cliffs, accessible only by a narrow mountain road. The withdrawal to Sfakia becomes an ordeal. Thousands of Commonwealth troops, British, New Zealand, Australian, stream south across the White Mountains, following a single winding road through the peaks. They're exhausted, hungry, hunted. The Luftwaffe strafes the columns. Stragglers fall behind and are captured. Leslie Andrew and what remains of his battalion march through the mountains. Of the 800 men he commanded 10 days ago, fewer than 300 are still with him. The rest are dead, wounded, missing, captured. Andrew walks at the rear, making sure no one is left behind. His feet are blistered raw. He hasn't slept in 3 days. He's 48 years old and feels 80, but he keeps walking. They reach Sfakia on May 29th. The port is chaos. 10,000 men crowded onto beaches, waiting for ships that may or may not come. German aircraft overhead, no food, little water, men drinking from streams, eating anything they can find. The Royal Navy arrives after dark. Destroyers HMS Napier, Nizam, Kelvin, cruiser HMS Phoebe. They anchor offshore and send boats to the beach. The evacuation begins. It's agony. The ships can only take a few thousand per trip. Officers try to maintain order, wounded first, then organized units. But discipline is breaking down. Men wade into the water, trying to board boats. Some drown. The ships pull away before dawn. They can't risk being caught near Crete during daylight hours. They'll return tomorrow night. Maybe. George Dornay doesn't make the first evacuation. He's too far back in the queue. He spends May 30th hiding in caves above Sfakia, watching German aircraft circle overhead, waiting for darkness. The second evacuation happens the night of May 30th to 31st. More ships, more men pulled off the beaches. Dawnay makes it aboard HMS Kelvin, crammed below decks with 200 other men, the ship riding low in the water. The destroyer races north at 30 knots, trying to reach Alexandria before daylight. They almost make it. At 0600 hours, still 50 miles from Egypt, the Stukas find them. The dive bombers scream down, bombs bracket the ship, massive waterspouts erupting on both sides. The destroyer weaves violently, throwing men across the deck. One bomb hits the stern, killing 8 sailors and blowing a hole below the waterline. But Kelvin stays afloat. The damage control teams shore up the breach, pump out the flooding compartments. The ship limps into Alexandria at 1400 hours, listing but alive. Dawnay stumbles ashore in Egypt. He survived. Thousands haven't. While Sfakia evacuates, the garrison at Heraklion is fighting its own desperate battle. The British 14th Brigade had held the Heraklion sector throughout the battle, beating back every German attack. They'd inflicted enormous casualties on the paratroopers. They'd never been defeated, but they're cut off. No supplies, no communication with Freiburg, no orders. On May 28th, they finally receive word. Evacuate tonight. Ships are coming. The problem is getting to the ships. Heraklion port is under German observation and artillery fire. The evacuation has to happen at night, under fire, while maintaining a defensive perimeter to hold back German forces. It's a nightmare of logistics. The Royal Navy sends cruisers at HMS Orion, Ajax, and Dido, plus 6 destroyers. They arrive at Heraklion at midnight, May 28th. The troops begin boarding under sporadic German fire. 4,000 men boarding in darkness, Germans pushing forward against the rear guard. The last troops board at 0300 hours. The ships pull out, overloaded, riding low. At dawn, they're still in Cretan waters. The Luftwaffe hits them with everything: Stukas, Messerschmitts, bombers, wave after wave. The ship's anti-aircraft guns fire until the barrels glow red. The sea erupts with near misses. Then the direct hits start. Destroyer HMS Imperial takes a bomb in the engine room, dead in the water. Destroyer HMS Hotspur tries to tow her, but it's hopeless. The crew is evacuated and Imperial is scuttled. Destroyer HMS Hereward is hit and disabled. She drifts, burning. German E-boats finish her off. 700 men go into the water. Some are rescued. Many aren't. Cruiser HMS Orion, carrying 1,200 evacuated troops, is hit by 2 bombs. One penetrates the bridge, killing the captain and the entire command staff. The second hits below decks, right where the troops are packed. The explosion in that confined space is catastrophic. 260 men killed instantly. Another 280 wounded. Orion keeps going. Fires burning, steering from the aft position, listing but moving. She makes it to Alexandria. When the hatches are opened, the scene below decks is beyond description. Bodies torn apart, wounded men screaming, blood ankle-deep in the compartments. The sailors who open those hatches will have nightmares for the rest of their lives. The evacuation costs the Royal Navy 3 destroyers sunk and 6 ships heavily damaged. Over 800 sailors dead. But they got the troops off Crete. Most of them. June 1st, 1941. The Battle of Crete is over. The last Commonwealth troops have been evacuated or captured. The island is German. Operation Mercury is technically a German victory. They took the objective. They control Crete, but the cost is staggering. German casualties. Roughly 6,500 dead, 7,000 wounded. Out of 22,000 paratroopers, nearly 60% are casualties. Entire battalions cease to exist. The 7th Air Division, the elite of the Fallschirmjäger, is effectively destroyed as a fighting unit. The Luftwaffe lost over 200 aircraft, mostly Jo-52 transports. These planes are irreplaceable. Germany doesn't have the industrial capacity to rebuild the transport fleet quickly. The loss will impact operations in Russia. For Germany, it's a Pyrrhic victory. They won the island but lost the war capability of their airborne forces. Hitler, receiving the casualty reports, is reportedly furious. He summons Student and tells him the day of parachute troops is over. Mass airborne operations are banned. The Fallschirmjäger will spend the rest of the war fighting as ground infantry, elite troops, yes, but never again used for their intended purpose. One battle. One island. The entire concept of airborne invasion rendered obsolete. The British casualties are also severe. Over 3,500 dead or missing, 12,000 captured. The Royal Navy lost over 2,000 sailors, 9 ships sunk, 18 damaged. But strategically, it's almost a British victory. By inflicting such horrific casualties, by making the Germans pay such a price, the Commonwealth forces ensured this would never happen again. They saved Malta, the next planned target for airborne assault. They saved Egypt. They bought time, and they proved that elite troops could be defeated by ordinary soldiers with courage and rifles. Lieutenant Colonel Leslie Andrew, VC, DSO, makes it off Crete during the evacuation. He returns to New Zealand after the war, retires from the military, tries to resume normal life. He rarely speaks about Crete. When pressed, he says only that his men fought well and deserved better. He dies in 1969, age 76, respected but haunted. George Dornay survives the war, returns to Britain, becomes a school teacher. He teaches history, ironically. For 30 years, he teaches British school children about wars and battles, but he never tells them about Crete, never describes what it felt like to shoot men from the sky. His students think he's gentle and kind. They never see the nightmares. Corporal Martin Pepple survives Crete, survives the Eastern Front, survives the entire war. He keeps a diary throughout, vivid, honest, horrifying. After the war, it's published as Heaven and Hell, the War Diary of a German Paratrooper. He describes Crete as the worst experience of his combat career. Not the most dangerous. Russia was worse. But the most psychologically devastating. We jumped into hell, he writes, and some of us never really climbed out. Konstantinos Mitsotakis fights with the Cretan resistance for 4 years. His wife Maria and their children survive the war, hidden in mountain villages. After liberation in 1945, Konstantinos tries to return to farming. Can't do it. The olive groves remind him of bodies hanging in trees. He moves to Heraklion, works in a shipping office, drinks too much, dies young, 53 years old, heart attack. His children remember him as distant and sad. They never fully understand why. Charles Upham, the New Zealand lieutenant who attacked the machine gun nest, survives Crete, survives North Africa, earns the Victoria Cross twice, spends time in German POW camps, escapes multiple times, becomes a legend. After the war, he returns to New Zealand and becomes a farmer. Refuses all publicity. Refuses to talk about his heroism. Lives quietly until dying in 1994, age 86. At his funeral, military honor guards from 3 nations attend. He would have hated the fuss. The German paratroopers who survived never jumped again in a major operation. They became ground troops, fought at Monte Cassino, in Russia, in France. Elite soldiers wasted in conventional combat because one island taught the Wehrmacht that airborne invasions cost too much. The Cretan civilians paid the highest price, thousands executed, villages destroyed, families shattered. The German occupation lasted until 1945, 4 years of reprisals, starvation, resistance, and repression. The island that fought so fiercely suffered for its courage. After liberation, the mass graves were found, the execution sites, the burned villages. Memorials were erected, but they can't capture the scale of suffering. Crete remembers. The island has not forgotten. The Battle of Crete changed warfare in ways that reverberate to this day. It proved that airborne assaults, in the age before helicopters, before precision weapons, were simply too costly against prepared defenders. The Germans never attempted another major airborne invasion. The Italian plans to use paratroopers against Malta were scrapped. The concept of vertical envelopment stalled for a generation. It saved British positions in the Mediterranean. With Crete secured, Germany could have threatened Egypt, the Suez Canal, the entire Middle Eastern oil supply. But the casualties suffered meant Germany couldn't mount follow-on operations. The Mediterranean theater stabilized. It delayed Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Hitler wanted Crete finished before attacking Russia. The battle took longer than expected and cost more resources. Barbarossa was postponed from mid-May to late June. That one-month delay meant German forces were still fighting toward Moscow when winter arrived. The delay didn't cause Germany's defeat in Russia, but it contributed. It demonstrated the value of civilian resistance. The Cretan civilians proved that armed populations could inflict serious casualties on occupying forces. This lesson was studied by resistance movements throughout occupied Europe. The cost was horrific. German reprisals were savage, but the strategic impact was real. It showed that elite forces, no matter how well trained, cannot overcome fundamental tactical disadvantages. The Fallschirmjäger were superb soldiers, but jumping into prepared defensive positions, armed only with pistols, landing scattered and disorganized, no amount of training compensates for that. Tactics matter more than toughness, and it reinforced the lesson that every generation must relearn. Victory and defeat are not always clear categories. Germany won Crete but lost the capability to use airborne forces. Britain lost Crete but prevented future airborne threats. Both sides paid in blood for lessons about the limits of military power. War is intimate. We think of World War II in grand strategic terms. Massive armies, industrial production, ideological struggle. And those elements mattered, but at the core, war is individual human beings making split-second decisions that determine who lives and who dies. George Dornay deciding to pull the trigger while a paratrooper drifts helpless in the sky. Konstantinos Mitsotakis choosing to pick up his grandfather's rifle instead of hiding with his family. Leslie Andrew deciding to obey an order he knows is wrong because military discipline demands it. Martin Pöppel jumping from an airplane into a sky filled with tracer fire because his country told him to. These aren't abstract historical forces. These are people. People who are terrified and brave and confused and determined all at once. People who made choices, sometimes heroic, sometimes horrible, in impossible circumstances. The Battle of Crete reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear. Every man who fought there was afraid. The paratroopers were afraid jumping into that storm of fire. The defenders were afraid watching thousands of elite troops fall from the sky. The civilians were afraid fighting trained soldiers with kitchen knives and farming tools. They fought anyway. That's courage. Doing the terrifying thing because it must be done. It also reminds us that victory has a price. Germany won Crete and paid so dearly they couldn't afford another victory like it. Britain lost Crete but survived to keep fighting. Sometimes defeat in a battle means victory in the war. Sometimes winning a battle means losing the broader conflict. The Fallschirmjäger learned that being elite doesn't make you invincible. The Commonwealth forces learned that retreat doesn't mean cowardice. The Cretans learned that resistance has a cost measured in blood and burned villages. Everyone involved learned that war is horror, not glory, not adventure, horror, the smell of cordite and burning flesh. The screams of wounded men, the sight of friends dying in the dirt, the weight of killing another human being, even an enemy, and carrying that weight for the rest of your life. We tell these stories not to glorify war, but to remember its cost. To honor the men who fought not because we celebrate violence, but because we acknowledge their sacrifice. They didn't choose this battle. History chose it for them. They did what they thought was necessary, what duty demanded, what survival required. Some were heroes, some were victims. Most were both. The Battle of Crete lasted 10 days. The psychological wounds lasted lifetimes. We remember not to celebrate, but to understand, to recognize that the decisions made by generals and politicians are paid for with the bodies of young men, that strategic victories and defeats are abstractions. The reality is blood and mud and terror. And we remember to ask ourselves, what would we have done? If you were George Dornay, watching paratroopers fall toward your position, would you shoot? If you were Martin Pöppel, ordered to jump into that hell, would you obey? If you were Konstantinos Mitsotakis, watching enemies land in your olive grove while your children slept nearby, what choice would you make? It's easy to judge from 80 years away. It's easy to say what should have been done, what could have been done differently. But when the sky turns black with parachutes and the air fills with screaming and the ground shakes with explosions, when you're 23 years old or 48 or 60, when you're terrified and exhausted and desperate, you do what you can. You make the best choice available in that moment, and you live with the consequences. The men who fought at Crete, all of them, every side, deserve to be remembered as human beings. Flawed, frightened, brave, brutal, compassionate, cruel. Everything humans can be, concentrated into 10 days of violence. Their island became a graveyard. Their battle became a lesson. Their sacrifice became history. We inherit that history. The responsibility is ours, to remember accurately, to learn honestly, to recognize that the capacity for both courage and atrocity lives in all of us. The sky bled men over Crete in May 1941. The ground drank that blood and remembers. We must remember too. Not with glory, not with pride, but with truth. That's what we owe them. That's what history demands. The Battle of Crete. 10 days that changed warfare. 10 days that ended the age of the paratrooper. 10 days of courage and carnage that nobody who survived could ever forget. May we remember them. May we learn from them. May we never repeat their mistakes. The sky remembers. The earth remembers. Now you remember too.